Thank you, Senator Kisang. I do not see any other senator, and so I'll call upon the mover to reply. Majority Leader, Senator Aron.
Few days that this bill has been on the floor of the House, listening to colleague senators speak about a very live topic in our country presently. You will recall what has happened the last weekend, Madam Speaker, where for the very first time we are told the Most Reverend Philip Anyolo, though from quarters close to the conversation, I'm told I've seen the governor of Nairobi saying he's still awaiting his donation back. I saw him say somewhere that when he inquired, because they had said they have returned the donations, he was told that the fundi had already cut the material for the choir, because the donation was for uniform for the choir. Madam Speaker, so these are the challenges. So this is a very live conversation even in the country. And I shared yesterday something on my Twitter page. And of course, the know-it-alls that live on that space, Mr. Speaker, because they never accept to be corrected for anything, did not believe what I said. Today, this afternoon, I have tabled the report from the Labor and Social Issues, Social Affairs Committee, where I stated that over 90% of the respondents that sent in memoranda with regards to this bill actually opposed the bill, Madam Speaker. Just like many colleagues here, a good number have opposed. It's almost split evenly in the House. There's those in support of the bill and those that oppose the bill in principle. And I said that we live in an interesting country, Madam Speaker, because if you follow the conversation online, it's like there are two Kenyas. That's what I've realized. There's a Kenyan online, and there is a Kenya, the Republic, where you and I come from the villages, where Senator Mungatana, Senator Elomonen comes from. There are certain conversations which, if you follow in the Twitter and Facebook space, the kind of things that I said there, most of the time, Madam Speaker, don't exist or are not practical in the real world of the villages and the people that we represent in this House. Because for every village that I have visited the last few months since this conversation began, many pastors that have spoken to me, I gave the example of AIC Ziwani, where I was 2 weeks ago. I was somewhere in Kipkelion West, in my own county of Kericho this week. And the pastors continue to tell me, please, Majority Leader, you have a very bad bill that you want to stop Harambees. Like many of the colleagues that have spoken this afternoon, they are entirely, first of all, misinformed. So there are two issues. Number one, there is misinformation generally, because this bill does not ban Harambees. It only stops you and I, public and state officers, Madam Speaker, from presiding over. Otherwise, Harambees are permitted, Mr. Speaker. But second and most importantly, unlike the statements that I see from churches here, I saw from Jackson Olesapit, I saw from the Catholic bishops telling us that we need to put, that the church actually wants to put a stop on this. But it's not what preachers tell us in the villages where we come from, including in parishes of the Catholic Church. In my own office, even as I hear what is being said by the Catholic bishops here in Nairobi, in my own office in the village, Madam Speaker, or in our counties, many of these members will tell you that they have cards of pending Harambee invitations from the same churches, including Catholic and Anglican. That's why I say it's like there are two worlds in this country. Some space in the air called online, where you're chasing things that are unseen and people compete for attention and applause. Then the real world in the villages where we come from, where people tell us different things. Therefore, as a legislator, Madam Speaker, sometimes it is difficult to know which world to react to, Madam Speaker. Because the kind of instructions and the things that I see being said in the online space, Madam Speaker, and the information, I want to believe that the reason Senator Mungatana spoke the way he spoke about this particular bill, perhaps that is a brief that he has from the people he represented in this House, the men and women from Tana River who voted for him. And they are saying, Senator, this is what we expect. But I'm sure you are also bombarded by messages and Twitter conversations, or people telling you, stop this. We don't want it to exist. So, Madam Speaker, our work as legislators is increasingly becoming difficult. If you are not careful as a legislator, and I warned colleagues of ours sometimes back here, that you can easily chase air in the names of TikTok likes and followership online and miss the real conversation sometimes that happen back in the villages. Because at the end of the day, a legislator is a representative of the people, and you must find ways in which you capture the views of the people on whose behalf you vote in this House, Madam Speaker. And that includes those that are in the online space and those that are offline, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I have listened to the comments of colleagues about this bill, very interesting, some proposing a total rejection, some proposing, like Senator Ledama, that don't just ban Harambees, look also into charitable organizations that run 1 or 2 charity activities in the country to ensure that they do this in strict compliance with our laws, Madam Speaker, that you ensure that in the contributions that they receive from donors abroad, Madam Speaker, the same is actually shared for the intended purpose of those who are making those donations. To those, Madam Speaker, that agree that we need to stop members of the public and state officers, Madam Speaker, from participating in fundraisers for the sole reason that it is one of the avenues through which we can demonetize our politics and reduce the influence of money in our politics, which, like the good Bible says, Madam Speaker, money is the root, actually, to evil. And many times when money is not prudently used, Madam Speaker, it can be used for bad things in our society. Therefore, Madam Speaker, my proposal will be that in such a time as this, where you have a report of the bill, you have members who have a divided opinion, before eventually putting this to a vote, it will be good to consult further and listen if, Madam Speaker, whether there is a way that the bill can be enriched, Madam Speaker, or do we lose the overall intention? Because there are those that have taken issue, for example, with the fact that you are proposing committees through which you can not per se regulate, but a reporting mechanism where the CEC in our counties and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Madam Speaker, can receive reports of some of these public fundraising appeals, Madam Speaker. And this is important, Senator Mungatana. I wouldn't wish that we lose that even in this conversation. Because how many times have you been invited to fundraisings where months later, if you try to go and check whether that money was actually used for the intended purpose, you cannot establish whether that happened or not. And therefore, there was a proposal. Maybe the mechanism that has been proposed needs to be refined. It is at this time that many people are beginning to speak on this topic and say, give us more time to make our contribution. Maybe, with leave of your office, Madam Speaker, it will be an opportune time to provide additional time for people to either think through and share their amendments before eventually taking a vote on this bill, Madam Speaker, including calling for submissions from members of the public. I said this yesterday on my tweet, and this is the accurate information. The report that is before the House bears me witness that there is no religious organization that sent in a memorandum on this bill. And that is quite curious, because I see people speaking very strongly. I expected to see the Catholic Church, I expected to see the Anglican, at least the two of them that have spoken publicly in support of this bill, Madam Speaker, to send in memorandum in support, Madam Speaker. There are also others that have spoken in opposition to the bill. At least it will have enriched our work as legislators, Madam Speaker, to benefit from their perspective, Madam Speaker. Therefore, this is an interesting conversation that the country needs to have with itself before the conclusion and the final determination of what to do with this particular bill, Madam Speaker. And therefore, as Majority Leader, I will be writing to the Speaker, seeking for additional time for first, consideration of additional views, and second and most importantly, to give legislators time to reflect and perhaps seek more opinion from your own people. Senator Mungatana, it will be good for you to ask the people in Tana River, including the young people that perhaps at the time where this conversation began, let's not lose track of history. This conversation began at the height of the so-called Gen Z protests Madam Speaker, and I'm sure there were young people in Tana River who spoke and said, yeah, we don't want politicians in our churches, we don't want to see them make donations, and so on and so forth. It will be important to listen to them over this weekend, especially as they speak in a large gathering at your village back in Garsen, you know, Mr. Speaker, so that they speak, Madam Speaker, sorry, so that they speak and instruct you in the presence of the rest of the voters, and they can hear what the feedback from the rest of the voters will be before you eventually cast your vote, Madam Speaker. Because at the end of it, Madam Speaker, this conversation is about trying to reduce the influence of money in our politics, Madam Speaker. And let's not pretend here. Harambees form part and parcel of our body politic, and the kind of contributions that people make eventually has an influence in the determination, Madam Speaker, of whether to vote for a candidate or not. It may not be the only determinant, but many of the times, Madam Speaker, it has been used as a yardstick to gauge your abilities and your prowess, Madam Speaker, in terms of marshalling resources, and people use it even as a determinant. Madam Speaker, if you are not careful, and if you do not put a check on this space of fundraisers, Madam Speaker, in another 2 or 3 cycles of Parliament, you will have these houses filled up with wash-wash characters, Madam Speaker, because increasingly it is becoming difficult, Madam Speaker, even to campaign on issues. How many times do these members of this House go out to campaign, Madam Speaker, and before you address a gathering, people don't want to listen. They tell you, we've had those stories before. They're already queuing and saying, just finish with us. We know what we'll do at the ballot, Madam Speaker. Therefore, we will have to be intentional. And it's not just by way of fundraisers, Madam Speaker. It includes the overall influence of money as a mobilizing tool, as a determining factor in who gets elected into Parliament and positions of leadership, Madam Speaker. We have campaign financing laws, but how effective are they, Madam Speaker? You remember when you were running for last election, we were supposed by law, Senator Mungatana, to open an account, you know, through which you channel your public, your campaign finances, you know, and manage it, then file returns to IBC. How many politicians observed that, Madam Speaker? So until there's intention on us as a legislature, Madam Speaker, to show that we are going out of our way to reduce the influence of money in our politics, then it will be difficult, Madam Speaker, for us to fight corruption, the biggest evil that our society continues to hoggle and fight about, Madam Speaker. And you know, this is not just about us as a political class. In fact, many of the beneficiaries of corrupt practices, though people imagine that it is we in the political class, it is actually those that are in public offices that are not necessarily political appointees, Madam Speaker. They are the ones who run tenders, Madam Speaker. They are the ones who do many of these so-called government projects. Perhaps what eventually gets to the political class is a fraction, and a very smaller fraction, as compared to what remains with the rest of. Take time to reflect before eventually taking a vote on this issue. I have noted and I have said that there are members who have raised serious concerns about how to address certain issues. I will be notifying the Speaker. Luckily, I have Standing Order number 66.3 that allows the request for putting of a question until a later date. In the intervening period, Madam Speaker, we could take that opportunity to either consult further and make listening to more memorandum from members of the public with regards to this particular bill. I will inform the Speaker of this request by way of a letter so that perhaps we can make an eventual decision actually on this particular issue. With those many remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to reply and request that in accordance to Standing Order number 66.3, we defer the putting of a question until a later date when all these other things that I mentioned have happened. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Majority Leader. That request is granted. We defer the putting of the question, and you can dispatch that communication to the Speaker's office on the request to receive more memorandum and views on this bill. I will now reorganize the order paper and call out and request the clerk to call out order number 16.
Order number 16, the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, second reading.
Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, be now read a second time. This is an important bill, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to appreciate what this Senate has done the last few weeks, especially with regards to our brothers and sisters that serve in our constituent assemblies in the counties. You remember, Madam Speaker, that we have already passed legislation in this House that grants financial autonomy to our county assemblies, and that bill is presently on its way to the National Assembly for consideration. One of the biggest requests and asks that actually the county assemblies have made to this House as an elder brother in the devolution family, to ensure that we grant them the freedom with which they do, Madam Speaker, their responsibilities. Second, and most importantly, Madam Speaker, is looking generally into the welfare of members of county assembly. Madam Speaker, you know at the beginning of this term, the kind of conversation that we had about salaries of members of county assembly, where SRC, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, drastically reduced remuneration for members of our county assembly and put it at a figure that perhaps shocked the country, especially those that know what service in public offices, especially elected officials, have to go through. And it left many of our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, in very difficult financial situations. And you know, Madam Speaker, I don't know whether that has contributed to the many wrangles that you continue to see in our county assemblies with the executive. In fact, in my 3 terms of being a senator, Madam Speaker, I have never seen a time where there is extreme wrangles between county assemblies and the executive as this particular time, Madam Speaker. And there are many reasons. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. But I highly suspect that the fact that the welfare of members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, hasn't been sufficiently addressed since the onset of devolution, Madam Speaker, has a thing or two to do with it. You know, members of a county assembly look at those that serve in the first term, Madam Speaker. If you find that your predecessor MCA who served before you, when salaries were better and there were more consistent flow of money to our county governments, Madam Speaker, ever since they left office, are living in raw abject poverty, Madam Speaker. Chances are, during your time of service, you will also be planning, because every politician lives with the practical reality of knowing that one day there will be a former something. It may be at the next election, the next or the subsequent one, they may survive it, but one day, one time, they will cease holding the power and the influence of public office, Madam Speaker, and therefore they need to be assured of their future, especially knowing the very fact that in this country, once you have served as an elected official, it's extremely difficult for you to secure employment elsewhere. Very few people will trust you. If you appear before an interview panel and you say, oh, I was a member of parliament previously, chances are very high that they will actually reject your request for employment, Madam Speaker. Then this passes and holds true from MCA all the way to members of parliament. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is not a waste of valuable legislative time to be processing this bill with regards to pension, actually, of our members of county assemblies, Madam Speaker. The principal object of this bill actually is to establish the county assemblies pension scheme, which is for all members of our county assemblies, and to provide for establishment of the scheme's board of trustees and provide for the scheme's management and administration. The bill proposes to have the scheme offer lump sum payments as provident, periodic payments as pension and income drawdowns. The proposed scheme will transition all members of a county assembly into one universal scheme for all 47 county governments, besides being open to other public officers and any other person that may be approved by this particular board. Madam Speaker, eventually when the devolution committee returned their verdict on this particular bill, because earlier on I asked Senator Abbas, who's the chairperson of this committee, and I've had opportunity to listen to County Assembly's forum, Madam Speaker, who shared their views and input on this particular bill. It will actually be important to note what their contributions will have been, how they intend the bill to be improved, but this is the basis upon which we are beginning this conversation on the need to ensure that members of our county assemblies, just like we that serve in the national legislature, have some form of pension, Madam Speaker. And let it be known, because I know how the Kenyan media operates, I would not be shocked if tomorrow morning I wake up to a screaming headline that says, oh, Majority Leader moves a bill to give pension to members of a county assembly. Then people will begin the usual conversation that is most of the time misinformed in our public spaces, Madam Speaker. This is not about raiding the public coffers. It is about setting up a pension scheme that perhaps, and just like ours, Madam Speaker, will be contributory. We deducted monies actually during our time of service here in this house, Madam Speaker, and eventually when you retire and you get to the proper age, Madam Speaker, you earn pension depending on how much you've contributed over the years. And that's why the members that have served longer, Madam Speaker, enjoy more resources, because it is actually a contributory scheme and not a raid on the public coffers, Madam Speaker, as many would imagine. The establishment of this scheme is paramount, as it will provide financial security, Madam Speaker, for members of the county assembly upon retiring, and ensuring that they transition out of service with dignity and stability. I've explained, Madam Speaker, how we undermine devolution by having people serve in offices where they know that my only usefulness to this society is when I'm in office. And therefore, sometimes, even in their decision-making, the fact that you have no guaranteed security in the future, people tend to make decisions that are short-sighted because they have no absolute plan, but plan for the future. But if you are certain, Madam Speaker, that there is already a scheme set out for you, Madam Speaker, where in future, once you retire or once you exit, Madam Speaker, from that particular office, Madam Speaker, there is a decent salary that can keep you going. How many times do you meet former members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, who struggle even with basic things as basic as school fees and even food to eat? Madam Speaker, my phone is full of messages from people that I know from across the country who previously served as either councillors or members of a county assembly. They gave service to this country, Madam Speaker, but we haven't organized ourselves in a way that you equally enjoy pension once your days here are done or in public service. Without a pension scheme, members and staff of our county assemblies face challenges in meeting their needs, leading to financial vulnerability. Therefore, this bill actually establishes the county assembly pension scheme, which will cushion members of our county assemblies from financial strain post-retirement. For this reason, the importance of this bill, Madam Speaker, can never be gainsaid. There are various parts of the bill, Part 1 to Part 5. Part 1 of the bill, which compromises Clause 1 to 5, contains the preliminary matters, which is a title, interpretation of terms, applicable clauses, Madam Speaker, and institution, organization, or state officer who shall join, and the scope of the bill, which is to the extent and range of those who may access services of this particular scheme. Part 2 of the bill, Madam Speaker, it comprises Clause 6 to 21, which provides for establishment of the scheme. It establishes the County Retirement Scheme Fund and its Board of Trustees, which provides the procedure for appointment of the trustees and the necessary qualifications. We don't want anybody, Madam Speaker, just any person that has the opportunity to arise and claim, Madam Speaker, that they should be allowed the chance to run these schemes. We need people that are qualified. So it provides that the trustees function and the powers and set the tenures to 3 years, renewable once based on their performance, Madam Speaker. Part 3 of the bill, it comprises clause 22 to 37, contains the provisions on the administration of the scheme and provide for the appointment of the fund managers and the custodian. It also sets out their function. The functions of the administrator, who is the CEO, are also set out. Further, the part provides for membership of the scheme without a sponsor, thus vesting of benefits and withdrawal from the retirement savings account and retirement from the service, among others. It sets out the prohibited payments from the scheme, the usual statutory requirements of any pension scheme for those that follow how pension schemes operate. Madam Speaker, this is nothing new. Part 4 of the bill, which is clause 38 to 44, Madam Speaker, it provides for establishment of and management of the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Fund, which contains financial provision. It provides for how surplus funds may be invested, as well as set out the requirements for the board to have a reserve account. Madam Speaker, a basic provision to ensure that for whatever reason, when members call upon the opportunity to draw from these funds, Madam Speaker, they have something that secures their future. You know, it's important, Madam Speaker, to ensure that our members of County Assembly actually, just like the rest of all of us that work in one place or the other, have financial stability upon their retirement. You know, Madam Speaker, it is not, Mr. Speaker, I have noted the change. I was pretty much surprised addressing Madam Speaker only to notice she was behind me walking by. Mr. Speaker, it is assumed what is a contribution to poverty, Madam Speaker, where when they say poverty is a vicious cycle, Mr. Speaker, how many times actually people contribute to their own poverty by ensuring that they don't join any sort of a pension scheme, and eventually upon their retirement, they have to rely on members of the public or members of their family to sustain their life. And this should be actually the way. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can get to a point where all public servants, and not just us members of parliament, actually make contributions away from the national scheme of the NSSF. I know every employed adult in the Republic contribute to the National Social Security Fund, Mr. Speaker. But over and above, there are many other pension schemes that people contribute to and hope that in their retirement in future they can draw from. It's my hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can have all our public servants actually have a fund set out for them so that you don't have to go through what public servants go through, like police and teachers, by queuing at Bima House, Madam Speaker, for you to get your file approved. And most of the time, this is money that has been deducted from them. That I know we have combined that particular space with the setup of the, I think, public servant super, there's something, a very big, some institutions has a very big confusing name thereabout, but I don't know how practical it is. That's not what we are proposing for the MCAs. This is just one purely for members of our county assembly. Part 5 of the bill, which is clause 45 to 53, it sets out the general provisions, including the duty of care of the board, protection of trustees and employees of the scheme from personal liabilities, offenses, penalty clauses, the usual conversations about how to manage a scheme and how they conduct their business. So I wish to state that this is a very important bill, and I urge members of the Senate to support, Mr. Speaker, so that our brothers and sisters in our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, can have a more reliable pension scheme system, and upon their retirement from public office, Mr. Speaker, they live decent life like they lived during the days as they toiled and served members of the public. With those very many remarks, I beg to move and request the Senator for Tana River, Senator Danson Buya Mungatana, to second this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.